All right, welcome in. Let me get all these other folks in here so we can start the show. And we got our spinning wheels going. 1, 2, and come on, baby, let's go. There we go. 3. Welcome in, welcome in. It is Monday morning, the 11th of March, and it's time for an episode of Broncos for Breakfast, as the hat says here. Pardon all the pet fur and everything. God bless. I live with 2 hairy beasts, and we're hanging out here. But Scott is finishing up the Forging the Falcons show over there. If you guys just missed us, we're talking quarterbacks with the Falcons, and we're going to be talking quarterbacks today with the Broncos as well. I am Nick Kendell. Scott will be joining us here in a second. And while he does, I'm going to take some time to say hello to everybody coming in here. We got Run It Back says Najee Harris should go first overall in fantasy with how many checkdowns he's going to get. Who was the other running? Jalen Warren. He was like unbelievable this season. Low volume. I'll always be skeptical about running backs maintaining efficiency when the volume upticks, but watch out for him as well. He was awesome. Todd Ostendorf says Russ is there to push Pickett. We'll see if Pickett's still there. He may not even get a start at the end of training camp. I don't think Russ signs there without some assurances, but anything can happen. We have Micah coming in, says Russ will be like the new Dalton. We'll see what happens with Russ. We got Corey Johnson coming in here with the cute kitty picture there. It seems like Russell Wilson's playing the whole time, was signing with Steelers. I mean, if you guys recall, it was around the Super Bowl, and the Steelers' odds for signing Wilson went from like plus 300 to minus 125. Somebody heard something behind there's some stuff going on, of course, when you see a big shift like that. So Wilson is a Steeler. We're going to see what happens. Colin Wood says, what's Tim Patrick's expectation this year and what's up with Sutton? I think there's very much still shopping Sutton. They are not, super duper they are motivated, I think, to move him, but not to the point where it was like Jerry Jeudy. So I think they'd rather keep Sutton than outright release him, and we'll see what kind of package we can get for him. It's very possible. You have players like Sutton and Bowles that, to me, you have this wave of free agency right now, and teams, if they miss out on those starting caliber tackles or wide receivers, there was a rare in free agency. You got to pretty much draft those guys to find them. But if you miss out on those guys, maybe teams will be interested and the prices change a bit. Maybe teams would be more willing to beat the Broncos. There's also, after day 2 of the draft, or even during day 2 of the draft, if those teams miss out on that, especially that wave of offensive tackles and wide receivers, maybe then you see an in-draft trade could happen, kind of like we saw the Broncos last year with Troutman, but to a grander scale. But right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen actually with Sutton and Bowles. We'll wait and see. I did hear, and I talked about it on a lot, that at the leading up to the Super Bowl, I had it that the Broncos and Bowles were pretty far apart, and it sounded like, even I can quote Palmer on this because he said it directly. He's got obviously way better sources than me, that Bowles didn't even expect to be back in Denver. Then the cap was announced that it's going to be expanded more than they thought it was going to be, an additional $13 million. Ever since that happened, the tune with retaining Bowles has changed in Denver. You have Simmons gone now. Don't think you can keep Bowles if you also keep Simmons. So the winds have shifted a tad for Garrett Bowles from who I've spoken with and who I've talked to. We'll see what happens with him. We're still waiting to see on Sutton. And there is Scott. How you doing, Scott?
Good. And good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. We're fired up already today. I hope you're ready for some football. The other point I wanted to make on Tim Patrick on here is, with his new deal, he's only costing $1 million extra than he would if he plays. There's no reason you have to keep him. You don't. But he was going to have a $6 million dead cap hit anyway. Mm-hmm. Now you're paying him a minimum of a 1.2. So now his cap number is 2.7. So I'm taking a $1 million gamble that Tim Patrick can play for me. That's all it was. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be back, because he was going to take, he was a 16-on-6 anyway, $16 million cap hit versus a 6 dead. So he was never coming back on that contract. He basically was cut and re-signed for $1 million. And now his cap hit is 7. So you're taking a $1 million risk, not a $7 million risk on Tim Patrick. So just want to be clear on what that means. It doesn't mean he's made the 53. It doesn't mean he's safe. It means they're spending $1 million on the chance that Tim Patrick can come back, and Tim Patrick is worth that risk.
Yeah. Especially given his blocking prowess and just very low. I mean, you're already going to, like you mentioned, the dead there. So we'll see what happens. Expectations for Patrick? I have 0 expectations. for Patrick. If he gets on the field.
And I saw when the announcement came up, Nick, the people are like, oh, look at that. A guy willing to take less money to help the team. Thanks, Russ. I'm like, that's just ridiculous. Don't let your biases for one player over another overcome common sense. Russell Wilson has a market. he had a guaranteed contract. Patrick didn't. That's what happens when you do restructures to take pay cuts. You either are going to be cut and get nothing, and you don't have a market. If Tim Patrick was coming off of 2 years with 800 yards receiving, he would have said, cut me. I'll go play someplace else, not come back for $1 million. Yep. So Tim Patrick had no market. This was a chance to hopefully it's a low risk, could be high reward. You never know. There's a big variance in there on what you could get back from Tim Patrick, but it had nothing to do with, oh, look at him trying to help the team. No, he's going to get cut, man. Yep. Let's take our biases out of it.
We got Adam Strange saying, what's up, Bronco Maniacs? What position besides edge, quarterback, defensive line should the Broncos get at 12? Playmaker, offensive line, defensive back. I mean, you're talking about the value spots. There's not really a stack linebacker, off-ball linebacker that's going to be worth near that range. There almost never is anyway. Payton Wilson might sneak into the first round, but not 12. There's definitely not a running back there. So at 12, I mean, you need to lay a foundational piece if it's not a quarterback. So those are spots as well. I am against cornerback from a philosophical standpoint on where this team is at in team building, considering you already have Surtain and you need a lot of value on the defensive line to even, make Surtain a more valuable piece as well. I think that amplifies Surtain more than another cornerback. But if you view like Terry and Arnold as a future Hall of Famer, then, you got to take the value. It's still a value position. So those are ones you want to look out for. Jay Roper say, yo, what's up? Good to see you. Yeah. Colin says best player available at 12. That's always gets Scott going. But you got to trust your board, and you're going to have baked in positional value into that evaluation. Sean Burns, good to see you. Run it back says hot take alert. Michael Thomas will be a Bronco 1 year, $7.5 million. We'll see. I don't know if Sean wants, he obviously has familiarity with Thomas, but Thomas is kind of, a little bit of a loose cannon, and maybe they don't want that here. We'll see. Adam Strange, should the Broncos make a play trade for a top 3 quarterback? I think they are trying to make a play for that. And I think that just like we found out, Broncos are interested in Cousins. Oh, they don't have the ability to go get Cousins. I think it's the same thing with trading up to the top 3.
Who came up with that anyway? That one was, of all the stupid things we've heard, that one might be the dumbest.
I believe it was Tom Pelissaro mentioning it. That wasn't just like connecting dots. There was rumors there. The Broncos were discussing it internally. Diana Rossini was also talking about it.
Yeah, you have the discussion, but there's no way. There is no way you sign a $40 million contract to this team. That's asinine.
He'd be a great fit for the offense, and it does make you more competitive right now. But I think I'm really pleased with the Broncos. The internal discussions sound like they understand that they're not in their window and that they're looking to improve the team, obviously, and still try to be competitive. But it's not a point where you have to be super aggressive. And trading for a quarterback is more of the long-term view if we're talking the draft. So if the Broncos were, let's say this was the Broncos, what year was it, Scott? 2022, before they traded for Russell Wilson, and you had all those draft picks, and you had, young emerging Jerry Jeudy, and you just had Javonte Williams have a great season, and blah, 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 and then Kirk Cousins hits the market. That's a type of team, I think, that's ascending in a way. You have all the draft picks. You're still well under the cap. That's when that move makes sense. You're not in that window now. Nope. You're going to fall off a little bit even because you don't have those draft picks from those previous classes filling in your roster and developing. So yeah, it just doesn't add up right now. Jamal Killings, good morning, Broncos country. Rebuild has officially begun. Should have happened 7 to 8 years ago. Yeah, they've tried everything besides the full-on rebuild, but we'll see what happens going forward. Mark Schrader, $10. Good to see you, Mark. Hope you're doing well. Adam Strange comes in and says, between Bo Nix and McCarthy, who is better? It sounds like the league is way higher on McCarthy than Bo Nix. McCarthy's a springier athlete, and he's got a better arm. And the teams love that P word, Scott. Potential. He's 3 years younger, and he's been a winner everywhere he's been. I mean, what was Bo Nix's view in the league when he was McCarthy's age? This is an undraftable player.
Yeah, he was UCFA. But again, we talk about potential, like
no guarantee.
Was poor.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about the upside, the potential, he's good. He's been successful. He's won a championship. He's got a good touchdown to interception ratio, incredibly accurate, good downfield thrower. He's not just potential. He's good. We're not talking about a raw diamond here. We're not talking about Joe Milton. We're talking, he's JJ McCarthy is all those things. Can he get better? Of course. They all can.
Yep.
But we're not talking about this raw athlete. We're not talking about Zach Wilson here.
Anthony Richardson even.
Yeah, or Trey Lance. He's much more refined than those guys.
He's had 2 years of starts. And because of the Cade McNamara injury and everything at Michigan as well, running I would argue the most NFL-like scheme in college football was what Michigan was doing with Jim Harbaugh. So it's physically, he probably does need a little bit of work in the putting on the weight department. I'm a little skeptical on what he weighed at the combine is actually, the playing weight or what he would play at this season, but needs to get a little stronger, a little bit bigger, but has the frame to do that as he showed at the combine. Olio comes, this is great to catch you guys live for once. Can't wait to see what the rebuild brings in the coming years. Yeah, I got to be patient. Scott, you've heard me. My football nihilistic take on this is that, well, if the Broncos were going to have an era of being in the trash, at least it came at the same time that you probably would have been in the trash anyway, because Mahomes is in your division. So happy to have that line up. And if you're going to take that rebuild approach, it's that Mahomes hurdle is still there. So by the time the Broncos emerge, you'll have that much less years of Mahomes to deal with. So that is me. That is called coping, folks. For those at home, that is
Twitch. I want to say hello to our Twitch followers.
Yeah.
Growing. Tell a friend. Like to see what we could do on Twitch. It seems like it should be more than just for gaming.
Yeah. We got Rub Bucksbaum in the house. Good morning. Best MHH team. Thank you so much. Talking Nick Beckwith in here, talking about trading up maybe 2 firsts and Surtain. That might be able to get you up to 3. I think New England might be interested in that if you're able to do that. Question is, do the Broncos like enough guys? I don't think that they are going to trade Surtain. I think you're a year early on that. If the Broncos absolutely fall off this season and are god awful and dreadful, then maybe next offseason you talk about that. But I think you're a year early. Roy Osborne, good to see you, Roy. Hope you're doing well. Mr. Roush is in the house. Good morning, BFB. Have a feeling we're going to sign some decent players in free agency. I don't think that'll be the case. Scott, I think you and I we both agree, though. If the Broncos are going to make any solid signing moves in free agency, it's going to come at one spot. And say it with me on 1, 2, 3. Defensive line. It's the defensive line.
Defensive line. There's
a lot of defensive tackles available in free agency. We've seen a good bit cut. And God, George Payton spent, 5 of his 20 minutes at the press conference at the podium at the combine talking about how bad the defensive line was. So I would be pretty shocked if the Broncos didn't go out there and sign a defensive tackle. Sounds like Mike Purcell wants to be back. I don't know if they'll do that. We're still kind of in limbo with DJ Jones, but there's a number of defensive tackles available that should solidify your unit. And you could just take that DJ Jones money, even with a dead cap, and just transfer it to somebody and get equal or better.
Now, I know you have to say, what can I get? Yeah. But going into the season with Jonathan Harris as a starter makes me question your team building ability. I mean, honestly,
yeah,
you could get guys off practice squads that were better than him. I've seen it done. I've seen UDFAs come in. That's just, I don't know what was going on there. I really don't. We tried to cut him preseason in 2022, and then I think he ended up practice squad, maybe elevated a little bit. Then he gets penciled in as a starter in 2023. Come on. No.
Yeah.
No. So
Yeah.
that has been corrected. Now we'll see. But you can go out and get guys that can. It's hard work, but you can go and get guys that can do a job on the defensive line for under $3 million. You can.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. We got a bunch of comments coming in here about the draft, so we better get into it. Good to see a lot of you folks coming in. Thank you so much for the super chat, superstars. If you haven't done so yet, click a like. That always helps us a lot. And so the big news is that Russell Wilson signs for veteran minimum with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Unfortunately, it is for the vet minimum. We talked about that being very likely the case. Then there was, oh gosh, his name's escaping me now. Longtime NFL agent, now does a lot of media stuff saying that teams might not sign Russell Wilson to league minimum because they're going to have to deal with the Broncos. Broncos have influential, powerful owners, and doing so might be a middle finger to the Broncos.
Hogwash.
What was
Washing of the hog. That's what I have to say about that. Hogwash.
for not signing for league minimum. I think that was probably very much a coming from somewhere. The call is coming from inside the house. That kind of thing, I think, was probably coming from somewhere Broncos related. But Wilson does end up signing for league minimum. Broncos do not get much, if any, cap relief from that. And he ends up going to the Steelers. And a lot of people I respect who were like saying, oh, maybe the Broncos shouldn't have traded for Russell Wilson because there's some signs of concerns here. Those people are all kind of pooping on the Steelers for, oh, a Band-Aid. You're going to be the same exact team you were last season. Maybe you get to 10 wins and then just get boat raced by a good quarterback in the playoffs in the AFC. So a lot of people kind of that I respect, not really a big fan of Russell Wilson. I don't expect the Broncos to get embarrassed or regret Wilson signing with the Steelers. It might end up being where the Steelers, a better team, not in a rebuild, even though maybe they should be, coming into Denver this season when the Steelers come to Denver and Russell Wilson beats Denver. Okay, great. Denver's probably going to get beat by a lot of teams this season. That doesn't mean they made the wrong move moving on from Wilson or anything like that. I don't care, honest to God, in that one game sample size.
If Russell Wilson was $1.2 million, he'd still be a Denver Bronco. That's not what it's about. And again, I read this out earlier. I want to read it again. Why Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this comes from Coach Ricalto on Twix. Russell Wilson accounted for 29 total touchdowns in 15 games in 2023. The Steelers quarterbacks accounted for 10 touchdowns in 17 games in 2023. Tripled. He tripled the production of the quarterbacks. Now, how much of that is, and get into this. I don't know if this is the Broncos fans even care, but do the Steelers have better offensive weapons / personnel than the Denver Broncos? Now, Sean Payton's as good an offensive coach as there is. That's a factor. But George Pickens versus Cortland Sutton.
I think the offensive infrastructure is pretty equitable overall, Scott.
Right.
I think that they obviously have Deontay Johnson. You have you just mentioned Pickens. I think the offensive line is a little bit worse than the Steelers, but they have the ability to add to that this offseason, especially now.
I like Najee Harris at the running back position, probably better than a coming off of an injury Javonte.
Jalen Warren was awesome for them at running back last year, too, if you remember. He won some people some fantasy games. I think the infrastructure is close, Scott. The big difference here is that the Steelers' defensive infrastructure is night and day difference. So the Broncos, unlike with Denver, either have to play in suffer ball to try to protect the defense like we saw last season, or open it up and then give up 70 and get Sam Howell unbelievable throwing around the yard. Steelers actually have the ability to control the game a bit because they have the defensive personnel where you don't have to go out there and protect them. It's honestly going to be more so the defense protecting the offense, where last year I would argue the Broncos offense protected the defense.
And, and as far as tight ends, Pat Freiermuth is good.
Is he a free agent?
Is he that old already? I've been doing this for about 3 years and reviewed. He was at Penn State, if I'm not mistaken, because I had Mark Brennan, Fight on State, come on my channel way back when I was first getting started to talk about Pat Freiermuth. I don't know if he's a free agent or not. So,
he is,
but
he's got one more year.
The point is, the Pittsburgh Steelers should be able to double their output at quarterback for $1.2 million. Okay, that makes them a better team, without a doubt.
Yeah. Especially for so cheap, they're going for it again. Mike Tomlin trying to keep that, winning season streak alive. I don't think there's much upside for signing Wilson for them, but there's also very little downside. So I'm not wishing Wilson poor or anything, and they're going to play. Obviously, I'm hoping Denver beats the Steelers when they end up going head to head, but that's more so because I don't want to hear it from, some aspect of Broncos country. Like, look, we made a mistake. No, you didn't. Oh, we're already paying Wilson. Why wouldn't you move on from him? Well, you'd owed him an additional $37 million, and the way the cap works, he would have been more expensive to move on from after next season than he would have been this offseason. And guess what? You're also probably splitting that June 1st again, and you would have been paying him not 2024, 2025 to not be here, but 2025, 2026 to not be here. So, or you keep him for 2 years. And does Payton want to do that? Do the Broncos want to do that for a 36-year-old quarterback who's declining? And I think skill set doesn't really match for how offenses have to play in today's game, it's tough. But yeah, Money Moore says, imagine we lose against Russ and the Steelers. My advice is turn off your phones that day, because there's going to be some irrational, emotional people on the socials.
I don't think that's even on the surface, comparatively speaking, anywhere close to losing to Zach Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett, and the New York Jets at home.
Yeah.
That is the kick in the nards, comparatively speaking. But yeah, I mean, the Steelers going into the season would be favorites.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's one. Now we were penciling in, the Jets as a win.
Yeah. And
it should have been a win. One of the reasons why Russell Wilson is not here any longer is because you couldn't beat teams like the Jets in the 1-5 start. That was when I was ready to burn it all down. Y'all have heard me say it before, and if you're new here, welcome. It was at 1-4 after losing to Hackett, Zach Wilson, and the New York Jets. I said nuke it all, every single one of them. And then you go on a 5-1 run, 6-1 run.
Yeah,
and it changed things a little bit, but then it was. You kind of been balanced out at the end. He said you were never as bad as 1-5, and you were never as good as 6-1. Kind of evened out. I said, listen, we've got to get out from under this contract. We cannot get where we want to be if we have a $55 million quarterback cap hit in 2025. And instead, you can knock that thing. You can knock $25 million off of that cap hit by moving on from Russell Wilson. And hell, the way you're clearing salary cap space, you could eat 85 this year and get $55 million back from that cap space in 2025. Yes, please.
Yeah, you definitely have avenues to add to the team. Troy comes in saying, who are 3 to 4 cheap free agents you like for Denver this season? I really like Daquan Jones. He's a defensive tackle. He's a little bit older from the Buffalo Bills last season. He suffered an injury, but he was actually activated and I believe played December 30th last season, and he was having a heck of a year before injury. So I think he'd be really worth a cheap contract to maybe bring in. There's also going to be some cheap safeties available. You have cheap safeties available as well. You had Poyer released. You had some other guys. So I'm expecting the Broncos to move out there maybe for a position like that. And there's a lot of really interesting cornerbacks available too that I can imagine would sign maybe a 1 or 2 year deal that makes you feel a little bit better on the outside. They probably would not be very cheap. And again, we're talking cheap. So we're not talking about, home run guys, but like Tre'Davious White hasn't been able to stay healthy, but if he can come in cheap, that might be somebody who's interesting to the Broncos. You have former early draft picks like Christian Fulton and Adoree Jackson, just trying to find the right scheme fit for you. Steven Nelson could be had for cheap as well. So I don't think you have to use the 12th overall pick on a cornerback, Scott, and because there's going to be a lot of, I think, cheap options here available. And heck, let Jim Leonard come in. Who fits your scheme at cornerback? Okay, we're looking for a veteran, cheap kind of bargain bin guy, but who fits to be a cornerback too, where you can bracket coverage opposite PS2, so you don't have to use a premium resource on the position when your defensive line is as bad as it is. Obviously, that's an issue with me, Scott. I think you could probably bring in a cornerback that would make a lot of sense here. That would not be super expensive.
Yeah, and I don't know the lower tier free agents well enough by any stretch of the imaginations, Troy. Apologies, but going between the two teams that I know the best, the Denver Broncos and the Atlanta Falcons, someone has said, I had a Falcons fan ask me a question. He says, we could use a backup center with starting experience. It's pretty good. I'm like, well, that's Matt Hennessy. He went in, he was the starter 2 years ago, got beat out by Drew Dahlman, who was the draft pick the Falcons got from the Broncos in the Javonte Williams trade. And then last year was penciled in as starter. I don't know how long you would have kept it at left guard, but he was a starter at center, has experience, is a free agent. That's the kind of guy I'd be looking for, to come in and compete with some veteran. He won't be all that expensive, Troy, at center. So how I answered that to the Falcons fan at the time was Matt Hennessy is who I would say if someone asked me, hey, who's a decent low-cost veteran center out there? Matt Hennessy. It's confusing as hell to then have Matt Henningsen and Matt Hennessy on the same team. That might be reason enough not to do it, but someone to look at there. And then wanted to say, Robot of Doom, thank you. And Troy, thanks for the support, sir. Certainly appreciate it. It says, breaking news, T. Higgins has requested a trade from Cincinnati. Thank you for bringing that in. And yes, Adam Schefter has that. He says, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins they franchise tagged him, didn't they?
They did.
Has requested a trade per sources. Higgins loves Cincinnati and hoped to be with the team long-term, but is disappointed the team has not had any talks on a long-term contract extension in over a year. So they tagged him, but they haven't talked about getting a long-term extension. That would typically take $100 million and 2 first-round picks to pull a franchise-tagged wide receiver. That'd be tough. Broncos aren't going to be in that market.
The issue is that the wide receiver...
That is definitely breaking news.
The issue is that the wide receiver draft pool is insane. That why would teams want to give up, a 1 and a 2 when you could take, Mitchell or Worthy or Pascal or not Pearsall or et cetera, Leggett, Baker. I mean, just the wide receiver class is unbelievable, Scott. That I don't know if it makes sense to do that and then have to pay that guy too. Now, I could see a team that has a young franchise quarterback rookie contract in place, maybe want to go make that move. But I'm curious to see what the market even looks like for him. You can request a trade all day, but I don't know if teams are going to be willing to give up what he is worth. Obviously, your worth what the market dictates, but what enough to where the Cincinnati Bengals would be willing to move on from him. Mark Schrader says, how much of a cap hit did the Falcons take a couple years ago? It was historic until what we saw this year from the Broncos.
It was 2022. Their total dead cap was $83.6 million was the amount of total dead cap they took on. Good Lord, guys. Cap hell, it's possible. And they came out from it and they were big spenders and they hit on all of their free agents in 2023. They just didn't have a quarterback. Then they had $21 million on injured reserve. So on active contracts on the team in 2022, they put $94 million on the field on a cap of $205 million. So they had 45% of their money on the field on game days. And they went 7-10. Arthur Smith did a good job with a bunch of scrappy players trying to eke out wins against a crap schedule. They went 7-10. They would have been better off going 2-15.
Yeah.
So they took an $85 million cap hit. That number sounds familiar. That number sounds familiar.
I think we're entering an era where the dead cap hit, getting money available for you in the immediacy matters more than the dead cap hit you're taking, because you've already technically paid those guys a lot. So I think you're seeing teams, the Broncos moving on from Simmons, the 49ers moving on from Armstead. I mean, 2 valuable guys still. You get
just wonder, when will owners decide, listen, I'm tired of paying these big signing bonuses to guys we're not going to keep. I don't want to pay Russell Wilson $85 million to go play somewhere else.
I wonder if it's kind of like the banks, too big to fail, but with the cap ever increasing, that they're just like, dead cap, schmed cap. I don't care. We need the money in the immediacy where we can sign guys, and then we'll balloon those contracts out the back end. And
that's not
like my baby's diapers. Steelers country, let's rust. Definitely some oxidation going on there.
We haven't even talked about this, Nick. How do we get 30 minutes into this and not talk about Jerry Jeudy being traded?
Too much to talk about, and that feels
Lots
like
going on.
With everything happening. Jerry Jeudy trade. Broncos save nearly $13 million, and they get a 5th and a 6th round pick back. I honestly thought it'd be like a 5th to send Jeudy plus a 6th. So having those 2 picks is good. I wonder if the Broncos would have just. It's better to have the picks in the end. So they get the Cleveland with him, and they get 2 picks in a draft that a lot of people say the day 3 picks aren't super valuable, but you have scratch tickets now, right? It's like you bought raffle tickets. You're not probably going to hit, but hey, if you do hit, great, fantastic. So you also have the ability to trade those picks for veterans if you want. You see that a lot, especially after the draft. That's how the Broncos got Troutman last year, sent a 5th round pick to bring in Troutman. And also can clump together some of those picks to maybe make a slight move up for a specific target day 3. So Broncos, I think the bigger thing here, besides the 5th and 6th round pick, though, is the $13 million in cap savings.
It's not even close. It was all about the $13 million. And we've talked about, what would you take? We hit on this a bunch. What would you take for Jerry Jeudy if they said, we'll take $13 million? We'll give you $13 million against your cap space and a 6. Okay, that sounds pretty good. I'd take, it doesn't really matter to me what I get back as long as you take on his full contract. that was the big one. Those were my thoughts, Jay, as far as what were you trying to get out of Jerry Jeudy? You wanted somebody to pick up the full freight on his deal, the 5th-year option. Now, can he go to a new situation and thrive? Yeah, he can. He can, but how long do you wait on the P word? Again, the potential on him. And you look at the numbers he put up, and his numbers were very similar to what Christian Kirk was doing. And Christian Kirk got a monster contract. It was $85 million on 4 years. Got a monster deal in free agency that started off the wide receivers. Oh my God, I can't believe what wide receivers are getting paid market. So he's got value, but it wasn't the right fit here. And maybe a fresh start will do good for him. And you needed the money. You needed the $13 million on that. Real quick, I saw something else before I wanted to go in. Oh, it was Todd talking about, when I was talking about the cap and the $85 million sounds familiar. The Broncos can spread the cap hit over 2 years. Yeah, they can. Absolutely. And they can structure it a bunch of different ways where they can take a 50 million hit this year and a 35 next year or vice versa. But why I brought that up, why that number sounds familiar, is because the Atlanta Falcons in 2022 ate $85 million in dead cap in 1 year. 1 year, they did it. Yeah. Broncos did that. That would be ballsy. I'm here for it, Nick. Yeah. If they can pull it off, I'm here for it.
I'm here for it too, but you can do it theoretically from an accounting perspective without having to commit to it this season because of rollover.
I know. The rollover I always forget about the rollover.
Okay, let's say just easy math here. You have an $80 million dead cap hit, but you can split it from a 30 to 50. But you don't have to spend that additional savings. So then you just roll it over and it's the exact same thing, but it gives you flexibility in the immediacy. Let's
try and get Sean Payton to say, no, I'm not going to try and improve my team this year.
I've
got $20 million available. My left tackle just went down. My wide receivers look kind of itchy, and I have $20 million in the bank. Good luck.
It's kind of like
that's what I keep saying. Does Sean Payton have the patience to commit to a rebuild as the general manager? Does he have the patience to say, oh, I could get this edge right now, but I'm going to have to give him Mike McGlinchey money? Does he have the patience? I don't know. The general manager, Sean Payton, the general manager, scares the bejesus out of me, Nick.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I do think that some of the comments, at least coming from Broncos country and what I've heard from people, what Payton has said, makes me think that he has the wherewithal to understand that this team is not within a window. But you're right. I mean, I have buddies, Scott, who, back in college would sometimes, hang out with the Devil's Lettuce, do that dance. And they'd have those I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but it's the padlocks or the storage lockers that have a timer. So that way they can't get to it after, 3 or 4 hours. So that's kind of like if you put the dead cap hit all this season, it's kind of like putting that lockbox in where it's like, okay, we know it's coming, but we cannot get to it until the timer goes off. So maybe it's something like that for Sean Payton. Coach Chris comes in and says, good morning. This offseason sucks, but it's needed. I look for us to bring back Simmons. We still have others to send packing or restructure anyhow, onward and upward. Can't wait to see us when the dust settles. Yeah, I think said it on here before. I was worried about the way the Broncos talked at the end of the season press conference, but my eyes are on 2026, Scott. Everything is you can go for a quarterback now that's still with the eyes on 2026 perspective as well. But I think 2024 and 2025, it's going to be getting feet on the ground. And Sean Payton has job security. So 2026 is what I think Broncos country should aim towards. That's when you want to re-enter the world of the competitive.
He's got job security, but again, you're going to work every day, with an arm tied behind your back. He is an egomaniac, ultra competitive person. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for him with the keys to the checkbook to show restraint. And the drafts, we saw it last year, trading up. I don't want this team to trade up for anything other than one of the top 4 quarterbacks in this draft. That's it. Otherwise, it should be stay put or trade down. But Chris, I just think, this came up, and thank you for the support that you always show us in the mornings. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah,
I think the heartfelt goodbye. This came up. I think the goodbye from Denver Broncos, the goodbye from Justin Simmons it's over. At least this year. Now, does he come back on a nothing deal and when he's 33 years old, to end his career as a Bronco, one final fling? We see that happen a lot. I'm running out of options, and do I Kareem Jackson this thing and I come back for 1 year? Possibly, but this year, I think he signs a 2 or 3 year deal, and it's not going to be with the Denver Broncos. Not this year.
Yep, probably not this year. We already said hello to Robot of Doom. We're all caught up on super chats here. So Broncos quarterback, they dipped their toes in for a bit, Scott, but then pulled out. It sounds like it's potentially. I know there's been a lot of smoke for Darnold, but the Broncos, unfortunately, just with where they are, having the wherewithal, it's probably not going to be an exciting splash for the Broncos at quarterback unless it's draft. But free agency comes first, so they're going to approach free agency and bring in somebody. It seems like there's a lot of connection right now, Scott, to Sam Darnold to Denver. I think that is a possibility, but we are waiting very much on the Kirk Cousins domino. If Kirk Cousins ends up going to Atlanta, I think Darnold ends up in Minnesota. It sounds like there's some connection there with that being a fallback option within the Vikings being aggressive for quarterback in the draft, but signing Darnold as that bridge. Obviously, Darnold would probably love to go there to work the throw to Jefferson and to work with Kevin O'Connell, who's been one of the top 5 offensive minds the last 2 seasons in football, in my opinion. So that's a domino to fall, but it sounds like there's a lot of Darnold smoke for Denver. If not, I'm curious about potentially maybe a Gardner Minshew or something like that. But it's not exciting, guys. I know it's probably a lot of eye rolls with the talk of the quarterbacks here. It's not going to be exciting for the Broncos in free agency. If you want exciting at quarterback, you better hope for the draft, and you also better hope that guy hits, because they can go from exciting to cow manure quickly if your quarterback that you draft with a high asset doesn't hit.
Yeah, I'm trying to hope that the reverse Skinnedy curse can work for the Denver Broncos, because I have been talking poorly about Sam Darnold as a quarterback prospect since 2017, since he was still at USC. So that would be like, oh, this isn't the guy. I don't really like him at quarterback. That's the best thing I can do to help him turn it around for you is try and jinx it. But I'm not a fan. I haven't been a fan of him since he was a prospect. I thought the trade up was stupid. I thought Carolina trading for him and picking up his option was stupid. I think getting him for $5 million is fine. I think that's okay if that's the best you can do, but it's a short-term fix. But the thing is with Sam Darnold, we talk about these quarterbacks' ages all the time. Why am I interested in Justin Fields? He's still just 25 years old. Sam Darnold's still just 26. Feels like he's been around forever, but he turns 27 this year. He's still a kid too. So, he's got 10 years left in him if he can turn it around. We want to talk about comps. The comp for him, there's your Jay Cutler comp, Nick. Here's a guy who has
not the arm talent.
Jay Cutler had better tools, but here's a guy who's got a good arm, good mobility, capable of the spectacular, but cannot stop himself from putting the ball in harm's way.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with him. I mean, to his credit, not to make too many excuses for him, but has there been a worse situation for a quarterback than working with the Jets and what they had there and then to Carolina? I mean, we saw what happened as soon as Baker Mayfield left Carolina. He looked god awful, and then he went to the Rams and had that game where they put up like 800 points against the Broncos on Christmas with Patrick Starr clowning Russell Wilson. And then he heads to Tampa Bay and looks pretty good. So maybe it's the stink of those two organizations. Maybe Darnold can be a little bit better with Payton. If that's Payton's guy, I think that certainly possible, but the entire league is waiting on that Kirk Cousins domino to fall. It could happen any second here, Scott. We might get it during the show, but before that happens, we got Darren Nelson. Take this, Scott. I wanted to run a mock draft today, but I'm going to have it set up where we pick every single pick leading up to 12 instead of letting the simulator go. So you take this one and I'll get that simulator set up.
Yeah, Darren Nelson, good to see you. This name feels like I should know you. This name sounds familiar, Darren. Says the thing for me is the comment Payton made, Sean Payton made about thinking he's good at evaluating quarterbacks while others may not be. This tells me reclamation or later round in the draft. Yeah, you can be better at evaluation. It doesn't mean you're going to get your pick. That's what I keep trying to warn Broncos country. Oh, I trust Sean Payton to get his quarterback. Well, his quarterback, pretty good chance he's already going to be gone by the time he's picking. Now, I think the trust factor here, Darren, in Broncos country would be that if I've got a competent quarterback, Sean Payton can get more out of him than most. I'm not worried about an evaluation contest. I think that's the ego to say something like that publicly is bad. That's a Charlie Weiss, Notre Dame of we will have a schematical advantage of everybody we play now because I'm here. The football gods frown on that. But I do believe that Sean Payton can put his quarterback in a better situation to succeed than most. Take a look at Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's 26-9 touchdown to interception ratio is better than half the league. And here we are gnashing our teeth and speaking illy of Russell Wilson when he's better than half the other guys that are out there.
Statistically.
You can say, was that Sean Payton? You can say, was that Russell Wilson? A little bit of both. I think something we have to worry about a little bit, Nick, is that we can just pencil in anybody and get 26-9. That's not going to be easy to replicate with your available options at quarterback, Nick.
No, it is not. No, it is not. So we're going to mock now. And Scott, I got a question for you how you want to split this. We can either split AFC, NFC, or we can do odds and evens.
We'll work together on it. It's fine.
We'll work together? Okay. Because I don't want to spend too much time on it since it's already 30 here. But I'm sure we can work together here and make it snappy and quick. So we're picking for every team leading up to 12. The Bears, I think we can agree here, Scott, right? Caleb Williams with a bullet. The only way this doesn't happen is if Washington gives up a unbelievable deal, never seen before. But I think that the Bears would probably just still right now just sit here and take Caleb Williams. I know that going into the combine, some people had question marks about, his team and whatever. And everything I've heard coming out of the combine is that once coaches actually sat down with Caleb Williams, they were blown away. They were like, wow, this guy is brilliant. Yep. No questions. The
smear campaign has turned fully to Drake May since it didn't work on Caleb Williams.
It seems that way. So I think we're going to go Caleb Williams here with a bullet. Now we're on the clock here with the Commanders. Daniels or May? Daniels or May?
Doesn't matter because I'm going the other one, number 3.
Okay, I think that the Patriots like May, and they might trade off if it was Daniels. And I think that there's enough smoke here with Daniels potentially being a fit with that team with the spread offense with Cliff Kingsbury that I'm going to go Daniels at 2 and then May at 3 if you are okay with that.
Like I said, they go 2-3 for me, and the order doesn't really matter.
Okay, I think there's a possibility that if the Commanders didn't go Daniels, that Patriots maybe trade off, but we'll see. So now we're on the clock here with the Arizona Cardinals. Is it easy? Is it going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. here without a question? Yes. Okay. We don't need to spend too much time on that then. Now things get interesting. The Chargers, since the Super Bowl, have been working the street corners, asking anybody if they, want a taste. they want to trade back terribly here, Scott. It sounds like they want a right tackle and they think they can get it moving back 5 to 10 spots. I think really the smart thing for the Chargers here would be to take whoever falls between Neighbors / Harrison, because Mike Williams is expensive and is never healthy. Keenan Allen is ancient, and you want to talk about cap savings. They can do that, but it sounds like they want to go right tackle in the Harbaugh era. So I'm not the street corners said slap yourself. But do you want to go wide receiver here? Or do you want to?
I want to go wide receiver here because, like you said, Keenan Allen is old. He's got a $35 million cap. They saved $23 million by waiving Keenan Allen.
Yeah. The issue also is they can find a decent wide receiver round 2. They want to trade down. I think if we had more time, we'd work in a trade down here. But in this situation, we're going to go with Malik Neighbors. Odunze is still very much in play here too, though, Scott. A little bit more versatile.
He's not that old. Yeah, Allen's not that old, but it feels like he's got the it's not the age, it's the mileage. It feels like he's got a lot of tread off the tire.
Yeah, he's been around for a bit. He's had a lot of injuries too. But we'll see. I think, again, they want to trade back and they want to take an offensive tackle, maybe a cornerback, maybe Bowers, but the smoke for the Chargers has been offensive tackle.
Chris Vanderford comes in with a super chat. Thank you, my friend. He says, Jacoby Brissett would be a great move, a great fail-safe. What was Jacoby on? What's he been making lately? Let me look that up because, again, you've got a decent bit of money tied into Jarrett Stidham. I feel like it won't come up for me. Maybe I don't know how to spell his name. Is it double S double T?
JarretTstid.
Yeah, I don't know why Spot Rack wasn't working, but I feel like he would be similar money, and I think he's a better quarterback than Jarrett Stidham. I don't think that's a hot take. I can't get it to come up though. Jacoby Brissett, he was on base salary 3. He was on a 1-year, $7.5 million contract last year. So 5 to 7, which is pretty close to what you're paying Stidham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Jacoby would be okay.
Sounds like Jacoby is very much linked with the Patriots as well, regardless of what they do in the draft. So we'll follow that and see what happens here. We're on now the clock with the Giants. I think that the Giants are going to go wide receiver here as well, unless they are J.J. McCarthy here, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to watch J.J. McCarthy in that spot.
I'll let you pick because you have the Falcons coming up, and what happens here.
The Falcons are going to have their quarterback going into the draft, so I'll probably go edge at 8. So it's a matter of, for me, for this one, would it be, do they want to? I'd rather have 5 years of J.J. McCarthy than 1 year of Daniel Jones right now.
So you want to go with J.J. McCarthy here at 6. All right, let's do it. There it goes. Now we're on the clock with the Titans. Titans, very interestingly, coming out of the combine, their general manager mentioned placing a premium on touchdown scorers, and also they brought in Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches in the last 10 years, last 20 years. So I think that they are not going to emphasize offensive tackle here as much as a lot of people thought before the combine. It sounds like there's a lot of wide receiver smoke here for the Titans, actually, because they can probably find an offensive tackle the next pick and lean on their unbelievable offensive line coach and head coach who's offensive line background as well. So I'm going to go with the Dunze here on this one as well, Scott. I think it makes a lot of sense. They've used picks on wide receiver, but they have not hit a Dunze very high floor. I think he's going to hit.
Yeah, and then again, offensive tackle is a sneaky need for the Atlanta Falcons because Caleb McGarry is a lot like Mike McGlinchey, and he's a run guy and a little bit of a liability in the pass. And he's got 1 year left on his deal for the most part. The flexibility comes there. But that said, edge. I'm still going edge here. Dallas Turner for me would be the pick.
Okay, Dallas Turner running it in. The Bears are beside themselves. They're crying. They hate themselves a lot. They wanted a wide receiver. I don't know, if Scott, if you've noticed recently, but a lot of the bigwigs have started to have the Bears actually the team to trade up to number 5 to get a wide receiver, or trade up to 6 as well. So we'll see what happens with the Bears, but they really want to walk away with one of these top wide receivers. Doesn't happen in this one. So unfortunately, I think I might have them go with Jared Verse. Pardon me. They really want to fortify that. Now, offensive tackles in play as well. Sounds like they really like my guy. We got Diana Rossini. We'll see what happens with that one. We'll follow that. But Kirk Cousins hitting free agency. We've been in discussion with the Falcons as soon as free agency opens. Yeah, that's not shocking at all. Thank you for letting us know, Granville. So I think with this one, Scott, I'm going to go with Verse just because pairing Verse with Sweat makes sense to me. And it sounds like they really like Braxton Jones, who, if you remember, I loved coming out of the draft, but the Broncos
he ended up being a 5th round pick too. He was like 6'4", but arms like a 7-foot wingspan.
Yeah, he was good.
Senior Bowl guy.
Yep. So I think edge rushers are going to go early. Verse tested well, and that's how it plays out. So now we're on the clock here with the Jets. I think this is an easy one for the Jets. They're going to run to the table if this happens. Joe Alt available here without question for me.
Yeah, that brings the Vikings up.
Now we're on the clock with them.
Yeah, I don't know what the Vikings are going to end up doing at quarterback. They may make a move for Justin Fields.
Yeah,
where do they go if Kirk Cousins ends up in Atlanta? The top 4 quarterbacks are off the board. They're a team that would look to trade up as well.
They might be the team that gets up to 5 to jump the Giants.
They're a team that would want to trade up. So do I need insurance? I don't think I need wide receiver. They're pretty solid there. They're going to give Justin Jefferson the bag, and then their rookie from USC had a pretty good Jordan Addison.
Yep,
had a good season for them, so they're not in at wide receiver.
It's either cornerback or defensive line I don't
You already
think this
went
is
Jared Verse. You could go Byron Murphy here. I know you'd be real happy with that one, or you could get your corner. And I'd rather have Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold than Cooper DeJean right now.
Yeah. So I think it is between Byron Murphy, Quinyon Mitchell, and Terrion Arnold. Do you have any, especially with how much they like to blitz up front, having another cornerback back there makes a lot of sense. Do you have any thoughts between Mitchell and Arnold?
I do not. I don't know them well enough to say this is the guy. You know, as far as like who's more physical out of those two. Quinyon's pretty good in, turn and release. I don't know how he is, physically. So that's where I would go on my tape and say who's the one that's better in press and who's the one that supports the run better, because I know they're both good in coverage.
Man, it's hard to say because Quinyon played mostly off coverage at Toledo, but we saw flashes of that. Arnold, a little bit more versatile, but Quinyon tested better. He's bigger, he's faster, he's stronger. I'm going to probably go with Quinyon here. Arnold is great too, but it seems like there's a lot of people pushing Quinyon Mitchell up to that first player. So now we're on the board here with the Broncos, Scott. Unfortunately, the quarterbacks came off the board. This is Bo Nix conversation here. I don't know if I'd love it at 12. It seems like people connected here are not as much about it. So the guys who stand out here for me for the Broncos, we're looking at the board. Brock Bowers, of course, tight end. Would the Broncos want to spend a first-round pick on a tight end who's plays at a lighter weight, didn't test because he had weight put on? A lot of schemed touches, but a lot of good yak stuff as well. Byron Murphy, you need to start laying bricks on the defensive line. Top two edge rushers are gone. Maybe we could talk Leatu Latu. I'm not as big of a fan. And then you got this run of offensive linemen here. You got Troy Fontenot, who can play inside, outside. He can play all five spots, Scott, honest to God. Talise Fuaga makes sense. Olu Fashanu. I mean, the value for the board here for the Broncos, the way it sets up here, it's offensive tackle if it's not tight end.
I think Sean Payton talks himself into Bo Nix and get the QB5 in this. So that's where I'd go. But this is you're the Broncos guy.
We'll go
here. But I feel like he's going to talk himself into, I evaluate quarterbacks better. I'm a better quarterback coach better. I need a quarterback. Here's a very productive, accurate, smart, mature quarterback. Bo Nix at 5. At 12. Apologies. 5th quarterback.
All right. That would not be the pick that I would make, but I'm going to let you take that one, Scott. I have a hard time getting behind Bo Nix that high because I just do not see the requisite arm talent for me.
But as you showed that graph, I don't think it was on this one. It was on the last one. As you showed that graph about where average yards per completion has fallen off. If you want to show that real quick, again, bring it up. The average yards per completion has dropped off a cliff, literally has fallen off a cliff. Bo Nix is making all those throws. I don't need a rocket arm quarterback to throw the ball 7 yards downfield.
You do if it's outside the hash marks in a tight window. You still do. There's plenty. I think shout out to Robbie, who does a good job covering the Broncos. But he had a clip the other day talking about Bo Nix, and it was the middle of the field one where if he had a stronger arm, it gets there. Instead, it arrives a millisecond late, and the defender is able to break on it and break it up. The arm talent still plays in the short window stuff. Yep. So I'm going to go Bo Nix in this one. Make Jeremy Sean happy. We love you, Jeremy. It's not what I would do as the Broncos here, but it is what happens in this mock draft. So
Coach Chris comes in, he says Broncos drop back to 16 and pick up Nate Wiggins, cornerback Clemson, get a 2nd and 3rd round for the pick. A man can dream, right? No way we get the top 4 quarterbacks. No need to trade up. Look for Broncos to address defensive line. Our run stopping blows. Yes, it does. Chunks. Just chunks. Again, Alex Singleton getting hell for missing tackles while leading the league in tackles and missed tackles tells me one thing. Alex Singleton is getting too many opportunities because the guys in front of him aren't doing their jobs.
Yep, tackles is a lion's
You got to get bigger. You've got to get better on the defensive line.
Yep. And I did not go kicking and screaming against Nix. I think it's in a conversation there, but I don't love him enough that I would probably sit there and probably try to trade back first before going to him. But it is possible. All it takes is the Broncos to love him and think that, hey, we can get ourselves a Brock Purdy here. Now, do you have the infrastructure around him to make him Brock Purdy? I don't think so. But that's the hope and dreams there for the Broncos. And there we go. So, yeah, I just don't agree with Jeremy about the arm talent with Bo Nix's ability to drive the football consistently, especially we saw it. I mean, he had a really chance to push that narrative away, Scott, for me in Mobile, and I just did not see it. where everything is the same and even, and you're throwing against air, and it's the ability, you're not having to worry about the pass rush or the manipulating the pocket or any of that. Okay, let's see it fly. Drive the football. You were down there, Scott. I didn't see it. So
again, I think he's got a middle of the pack arm at best, and that's tough to take at 12, where I'm looking for freaks of nature, so to speak. Again, if I knew I could get him in the second, I'd be thrilled with that. I don't know that you can. That's the problem on that. Coach Chris, that's funny. And then Patrick Wiltsey comes in and says, "Aloha Broncos for breakfast. Free agency can be crazy. Mock season is upon us." Thank you to your Lion Coffee. LionCoffee.com. Check it out. I know my father-in-law got some Lion Coffee as well after I left him a bag that you sent us. So thank you so much. Coach Chris, I love this. Hadn't really thought about it. He says, "We had the snake. Could we have the rattler?" Maybe. I don't see that big a difference between Rattler and Nix. I don't see a huge difference there. If Spencer Rattler had washed out of Oklahoma and gone to Oregon, he would have put up pinball numbers too. Instead, he went to South Carolina, and they're not as good. They're just flat out not as good as Oregon, and they play tougher competition week in and week out. But as far as the tools go, Nix is a little bit bigger. I think he's probably a better athlete.
He's definitely a better athlete.
And then, but Spencer's got, I think overall, has the better arm.
He's just a little bit, he's got some Drew Lock WTF moments. Why didn't you see that defender? But yeah, we'll see. So unfortunately for the Broncos here, I guess not unfortunately, fortunately for some, I would not be a big fan of Nix at 12, but it makes sense. And I would understand it if they did that. I think it's a low ceiling option for Denver in the end, but one that can give them some competency over the rookie contract, even though you're kind of giving up the value of that rookie contract when you're paying that much dead cap to the quarterback position. But we'll see. I'm obviously a hater if it comes to Nix. I'm not all in on that one. Jess Kennedy says Penix would get hurt opening a bottle of water. Sounds like the medicals passed at the combine, Scott. So we'll see what happens with Nix.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, someone said, well, anybody can get hurt. Yeah, but 4 times. He's had 4 season-ending injuries. That gets scary. That'll make you an old man in a hurry. Where it's hard to get out of bed at 30, and he's an older guy. Gary Fire says, rest in peace, Steelers, after they sign Russell Wilson. Gary, I don't think $1.2 million of salary into Russell Wilson's really going to hurt them that much. If he doesn't work, sayonara. So it's low risk. Now, using a first round on Kenny Pickett, they still, the question is, how much did they improve? They were a playoff team with 10 touchdowns from their quarterback position last year. 10. And this team made the playoffs in arguably the hardest division in football. Russell makes them better. I think he makes them better. How much better? We'll see. But he makes them better at 0 cost to the Steelers. Russell Wilson is doing more damage to the Denver Broncos this year and next year than he will do on the Pittsburgh Steelers, even if he doesn't play very well.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. But guys, we got to get on out of here. What was it? It's Hydra. Yep. We got to get on out of here. Otherwise, don't want anybody to get upset at me. We got Michael coming in. Says, great show. Nick and Scott and Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. Appreciate everyone coming in today. Fun show. Things are about to get started. Broncos not going to be big players this offseason, but that's okay. And they're going to improve. That's for sure, guys. Some new talent that we'll see. So appreciate everyone. Todd says he doesn't agree with me on Bo Nix. Hey, man, time's going to tell. I think a lot of times with quarterbacks, you're going to be proven right more than wrong if you end up being a doubter.
Respect his opinion and still disagree. It doesn't mean you disrespect. Just, hey, listen, we disagree on this. That's okay. We disagree on a lot of things.
Yep. You'll be proven right more times than not if you're a skeptic. If you want to bet against. That's the way it works. Unfortunately.
They're much more likely to fail than succeed. That's the nature of the game. It's a hard game.
Even Payton said, there are 5 quarterbacks this year. Which 1 or 2 is going to be the ones that hit?
Yep.
We'll find out over time. But appreciate everyone. Make sure you're following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle if you haven't done so yet. Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. And as the ticker says here underneath, please subscribe, like, and share over on the social media platforms. That's going to have to do it for us today. We'll see you guys again live on Thursday morning. Obviously, we'll have some updates for the Broncos news then, and we'll be talking Falcons and whatnot also Wednesday morning. So appreciate everyone. Scott, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, everybody, for coming in. We got a lot of people watching this morning, over almost 400 concurrent. That's a good day for us. Lots of news coming with free agency, so stay tuned. Keep it on MHH. Hit those notifications because there will be content coming from MHH all day. Want to say thank you to Mark Schrader, to Troy, Coach Chris coming in several times, a benefactor of the show today. Chris Vandeford, that feels like a newer super chat. And again, like I said, the rest of my list is all Coach Chris. So Coach Chris, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all of you for the support for the show. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Everyone have a fantastic rest of your Monday. Hopefully the daylight savings isn't kicking your butt. And choose kindness and compassion, of course. Go Broncos.